Traffic and Parking Commission meeting, and let the record reflect all commissioners are in attendance. And before we start, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would all stand, I will lead that. Please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So the first item on our agenda is public comments. Public comments are about an item that is not on our agenda. And you'll have about 3 minutes to speak. There's a little light up there that turns green, and when your time's about ready to run out, it'll turn orange, and then when your time's expired, it'll turn red, and you'll be asked to finish your comment. Are there any public speakers for public comments?
Yes, sir. Jeff Mueller, followed by Rich Farina.
Welcome.
I wanted to take this opportunity to bring an item to the Commission's attention regarding the intersection of Peachwood and Palmwood. Major cross streets are Lake Forest and Trabuco. This area has been I've lived in the area for 20 years or so, maybe more than 20 years, and this intersection has always been dangerous because you've got the traffic coming up the hill, traffic coming down the hill. You've got a high-density apartments there, you've got homes, and recently, within the last month or so, there was a fairly serious accident, and it just seemed like the appropriate time to bring this to the city's attention. So this observations and recommendations have been submitted to the city for consideration. The engineering department has reviewed it, and their response is that it's not really, my interpretation is it's not really an area of interest for them right now. Understanding what I perceive to be a serious public safety threat, I wanted to bring it to the council and make you aware of that. The conditions primarily, because it's 2 lanes in each direction, I mentioned that, traffic coming up the hill, a lot of that traffic is turning into Palmwood, and anyone who's trying to exit the Palmwood intersection, this is the lower Palmwood intersection, it's difficult to get out. People are not signaling. The turning cars, especially in the evening with the lights and whatnot in the sunset, it's difficult to see the cars in the other lane. It's almost like playing Russian roulette. I've been through that intersection a number of times, and I feel like I'm taking my life in my hands every time I do. So I wanted to raise that issue to you, make you aware, ask for you to review the situation and potentially take some action. I've got ideas. A number of my neighbors that I've talked to have ideas as well. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't. I'm not so set on a specific idea as I am that the city needs to take action for the general public good. So that's all I really had to share with you. I would implore you to do something about it, because this is twice now it's gone in front of the city. It's a problem that's been in place over 20 years. We need to do something about it now.
Thank you.
Rich Farina, followed by Mark Alexander.
Good evening, Rich Farina. I'm a member of the Board of Directors and Homeowners Association up at the top of Peachwood and also in Lake Forest. I recently attended a presentation by the developer of the Tpc homes that are at the top of Peachwood. They gave us a lot of information, a lot of concerns that homeowners had. One of them that we brought up was the increase in traffic going up and down in Peachwood. And I asked the question, maybe it wasn't me, but we discussed this for quite a while, as to whether or not there was a study done about the amount of traffic, because there's 80 some odd homes that are going to be added to that. 2 cars at a minimum going up and down the street every day, whether there was any traffic study. And he said no. I said, did you ask for one? He said no. So I want to make you all aware, as a traffic commission, that there's going to be a request for that, if not by the developer, definitely by those of us that live near there. As the gentleman before me talked about, that is a terrible intersection. It's only going to get worse, and this increase in traffic is going to make Peachwood, there's only one way in and one way up, and down for that development. I don't know if you've ever been up there. There's only one way up, one way out.
Every day.
Every day. That's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, sure, Jim. Okay, thank you. So you're aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
And as you probably know, it's probably what you did, and I applaud you for doing so. About 2 years ago, you made the left turn lane longer because it was too short for the cars that always would turn left. That's not going to be long enough when you get at a minimum all those cars. So that's why I'm here. I want to make sure you're aware of that because it's a potential hazard based on it's very interesting based on what Jeff was just saying. So it's only going to be worse, and plus there's just more traffic.
Okay.
And that's what you guys do. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just for clarification, when the EIR was done for the Terracina, which was not Terracina, there was an EIR done, right, with traffic?
Yes, there was, and it did include a traffic
That's what I
analysis.
thought, yeah. So
We asked the current developer, who is not the one you're talking about,
Right.
and he said no. In fact, he was very
they probably didn't do it.
somewhat
The original developer did, correct?
Correct.
at this.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. My light's still yellow. Go ahead.
You mentioned the homeowners association. Are you an officer in that
Yes, I am.
association or a member?
Yes, I am. I'm an officer.
You're an officer.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Mark Alexander.
Good evening. I'm their neighbors also. I'm concerned about the traffic going up and down Peachwood at that corner of Palmwood. There's many times that because of the timing at the light at Trabuco and Peachwood, the people coming out of Palmwood are very anxious to get across the street. So what they'll do is they'll hang their front of the car out into the first lane there a little bit further, a little bit further. There's been many times that I've had to try to dodge that to get around to get up to the top of Peachwood. That's the first thing that I wanted to talk about. The second thing was the timing of the lights at Peachwood and Trabuco. There are many nights or even early mornings where I'll be sitting at the light there and coming from Peachwood, turning left on Trabuco, where there's no traffic at all. And I noticed that there are sensors in the road, so I would assume that that means that it's picking up some kind of mechanism to change the lights. Maybe I'm wrong at that. But you'll sit there for almost up to 2 minutes on some occasions. Also, the left turn lane from Trabuco to Peachwood, same situation. Now, I'm just a chemical engineer, so I don't really know anything about this kind of thing. But I don't think it would be that difficult to time that a little bit better so traffic is moving a little bit faster through there so we don't have the anxiety of the people coming from Palmwood trying to get out onto Peachwood to make the lights. Thank you.
Thank you. So usually at the end of the meeting, if the commissioners wish to put something on the future agenda for discussion, that's the time we will do that. Correct, unless anybody wants to do it now, but generally, that's what we have been doing.
What agenda would that be? I know we've got a laundry list of future items.
Right.
This sounds like it's not a new issue, and I know your office has responded. Might we put it on the agenda soon rather than later?
Yes, item number 3, I believe, is the Traffic and Parking Commissioner's area of interest. We can add items to that, and that would be the appropriate place to put it, because we don't take those in order necessarily. We kind of prioritize those, and we move forward with that.
I think at the end of the night would be a better time, because there's going to be other things come up tonight to talk about what's on our future agenda. It's full. So, is there any other public comment?
No, sir, that's it.
Okay, next is the consent calendar items. These are routine items approved as a group. Is there any member of the audience that wishes to pull a consent calendar item?
No, sir, we received no request.
Is there any member of the commission that wishes to pull a consent calendar item?
I'd like to pull number 4.
Number 4? Is that, that's a letter, right? is it D, C, or B? Sorry. We have a new agenda. I don't have numbers, I got letters.
So if the commission would like to, if that's the only item pulled, is vote on the consent calendar and then come back to
I'm
that
trying to
item.
figure out which one he wants to pull.
If I can help, it's called Traffic and Parking Commission ALF tickets.
ALF tickets, okay?
And with that, I'll move the remainder.
It's D. D or number 4.
So 4 and 3?
You want 3 pulled also?
No, wait.
It's traffic and parking ALF,
Mark clearly, 4?
traffic and
Jordan
parking
called 4. I just
commissioner
clarified what it was.
ALF tickets. That's the item that's been requested to be pulled.
I think my interest is the fact that, with the coming city council election, that there's, real-world possibility that makeup of this commission could change. And therefore, I think that's something that, we haven't talked about as commissioners, that someone new could be sitting at any one of 2 seats for sure, and any one of 3, and I'm not sure what the timeline is that you gentlemen have thought through and possibly talk with the city council about. I mean, if anybody gets on the city council, I'm not going to be here, but what's the thinking in terms of replacement time and that kind of thing?
What item are you talking about, Sonny?
Well, I don't know which one is.
We're on the
Areas of interest.
Oh, so do you want to pull the areas of interest for discussion?
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to pull areas of interest and ALF tickets for discussion.
I'll move the remainder.
Seconded by Jordan. All in favor, say aye.
Oh, you want to vote electronically?
Oh, yeah, we got to do that, don't we? I got these fancy buttons. Sorry, guys. Got to push our buttons.
I think we need one more. Okay, there we go. Okay, that motion carries unanimously.
So the item pulled is Traffic and Parking Commissioner area by Commissioner Morper.
If I may, if I understand the question, just a timeline of what happens after councils. We can have a memo sent to you on that timeline. I don't know it offhand, but I think it's 30 days after the election date is when they certify the election, and then a new council is seated. And I don't know when that is anymore. Offhand, I believe I think it might be the second meeting in December. I'm not sure. But it's at certain point, 30 days after the election is when the election's certified, is my understanding. Then, if there are new council members, they would go through a selection process. So that's, I think we'll probably open up the nominations, the reappointment process for that, and then the new commissioners would be selected sometime probably in January, I would guess. But we'll send you a timeline on that for all the commissioners from the city.
Really, the major part of what I was referring to, the reality is we've got a couple of things that are, I would hope if this group of 5 stayed the same, that we would be able to move some things along. We're getting citizen input now. And studies and so forth. It seems to me it might be reasonable to ask the commission to consider an additional meeting and maybe make it a study session where it's legally constituted, where the only agenda item are the consultant reports and that kind of thing. And then a meeting like this is where decisions relative to recommendations are made. That way we expedite things. That's what I'm looking for. A meeting every month. Gee, weeks go by and something new comes up. And, I think we could do more faster. That's my point.
Any other comment? I'd like to move very fast too, but I think our calendar's pretty full next month, and it'll probably be fuller after tonight's meeting. So I'm not sure if anybody has any suggestions or ideas.
I do have a comment on it. I agree there's a lot of stuff that's coming before. The calendar is already, out through March. We're getting additional items. I just think we're also restricted by staff's time and availability, that there's only two, one of them being a consultant, one full-time. Mr. Rogers, I think these are complex issues that take a lot of time and preparation and analysis, so I think while it can be frustrating for us and the public, I think we need to keep a steady course and continue to move forward, but be respectful and see what staff can do. At my first meeting, and for everybody in the audience, I asked for additional staff. There's positions that are being filled. You know, if this is such a priority to the city and the #1 complaint, if us as a commission is hearing that staff delays and it takes a lot of staff time to process a lot of this information. I mean, we're paying consultants to go sit out there in the middle of the night to count cars. That needs to be a priority from above us, and that would be my concern, is too much time on staff and not available to move it any further than we currently are. So until that gets solved, I'm not sure that's really possible.
So would somebody like to move item C or number 3, the area of interest, moved by Commissioner Teddemer, seconded by Commissioner Pequeno? All in favor, please vote.
Okay. That motion carries unanimously.
Next item that was pulled is the Traffic and Parking Commission Ask Lake Forest, or ALF, tickets.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple comments when I was reading through each of the comments, and I appreciate staff's in-depth response to a lot of them. Just a couple that I want to talk on is, someone mentioned, it was a shorter one actually, the request to possibly extend the parking permit till like 11 in the morning because they might have overnight guests that are staying. Does that ring a bell for anyone? I can't find the one.
Mine were hard to read.
So I know we're looking at possibly changing this, but I do agree. I think there should be an option. You know, when you check out at a hotel, you don't check out at, 1 a.m. You check out at 11. That maybe there should be an option for that, as people around the holidays have visitors that might stay overnight. I think that should maybe be explored and maybe included. I think it's a good idea. So that's my opinion on that. And then the second one was regarding the vans that are parking. I was wondering if staff had any input and response from OCSD specific to this concern. It's more of a public safety rather than parking, for my opinion, but I know that the response was that we'd ask OCSD, so I was wondering if we had any feedback.
Yes, we did get a response back from OCSD. The response came in October 18. OCSD has mobilized parking enforcement as well as a homeless liaison officer, and they're working on those issues at this time. A solution is in the works. That was a comment we got back from OCSD. So they are working on it. We do have a homeless liaison officer that's recently been hired, and they are working through them to address the issues of people that I guess were camping in their vans or sleeping in them or staying out there. So,
Okay. I just appreciate it. I know that, you plug one hole and it pops up somewhere else, and so I'm moving, but I'm sensitive to those concerns.
okay. Thank you.
Would you like to move the item? Seconded by
I'll second.
Commissioner Wilmot. All in favor, please vote.
Okay. That motion carries unanimously.
Okay, next item on our agenda is results of permit votes for Bennett Ranch and Sky Stella. I assume staff would like to do a short report.
You bet. To the commissioners, as you're aware,
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Chair Record, we do have one speaker for that.
Oh, don't we usually do that after staff?
Chair's prerogative.
We can have the speaker first, I guess. Why not? Let's do the speaker.
Okay. That's Anita Greer.
Okay, there it goes.
There it goes.
My name's Anita Greer, and I'm a resident of Bennett Ranch. I live on Brookhaven, one of the streets that unfortunately we did not receive the required 67% of votes necessary for the parking permit. I'm here with neighbors. We're really concerned that not only will vehicles from outside Bennett Ranch be parking on our street, but now our Bennett Ranch neighbors will start using our street for parking their additional vehicles. It's really upsetting to see that the fate of this vote will have such a negative impact on our property values, something that we have worked really, really hard for. We continue to witness firsthand vehicles from surrounding complexes that must now pay for parking for days on our street. They collect dust along with trash that's left behind, beer bottles, plastic bags, all kind of unmentionables along the street. So we urge that the Traffic and Safety Commissioners please reconsider our concerns and allow a revote for Bennett Ranch, for Brookhaven specifically. We have banded together, here's my neighbors, and we are dedicated to a revote. We have a petition here, which I would like to present today. It has 14 of the signatures of homeowners on Brookhaven who are committed to a parking permit revote. They're verified signatures of names that match the property records. And we also have 2 homeowners in our area that are out of the country that we're still working on to get their signatures, who rent their properties out. So, may I?
I'm sorry, your request is for a revote on one street?
On
the 3?
Brookhaven, yes.
Just
I'm
Brookhaven?
representing, yes, Brookhaven.
How many homes are on that street?
21. It's the longest street out of the whole, in that neighborhood.
Oh, turn your microphone, sir.
Turn on your mic, son.
Your microphone? It's off.
Sorry.
It's okay.
You say there's 21 homes on
Brookhaven,
on the street you're referring to?
yes, I am.
And how many have signed this petition?
14.
14.
We are working on 2 others who have homeowners that are renting their homes out to get signatures from them as well.
So 2/3 of the existing homeowners are represented on this petition. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, yes.
So, and as I recall, that doesn't meet the threshold, does it? If that was the vote?
Yeah, if there was a vote today
be
and
67.
21 residents, 2/3 of those would be 14.
It would go?
Yeah, that would be approval, yes, 67% would be approval.
And now, and the current policy that we have in place has to do with revotes. Effectively, you're asking for a revote.
That is correct.
What's the?
Yeah, the policy right now does not allow for revoting, except within a 24-month period. The city staff goes out and reevaluates and reanalyzes the situation. I think it's one of the items you guys were looking at as far as
Right.
some policy changes we were looking at recommending to the council, and that'll be brought back whenever you decide you would like to hear that.
So are there any other speakers on this?
No, sir.
So we also have, I received a letter from Bennett Ranch Homeowners Association asking for a revote. So this agenda item tonight, Commissioners, is a receive and file. We're not taking any action on it. It's basically a report. Here's the results of the vote that the City Council authorized a couple of months ago. We didn't. This was something prior to our existence. So we can't take any action for the Brown Act to require a revote or do anything, and the policy says 2 years for a revote. However, at your last meeting, this was an item that was discussed. There's circumstances that may need that parking policy to be revised for a revote. You guys discussed that at that last meeting sooner than 2 years. And plus, I'm quite concerned, as the lady mentioned, that there'll be some cars parked on those streets that can't park in the other streets that approve permit parking. So I would suggest tonight that we receive this report and that we do 2 things. We change the agenda for November to add the revised parking policy for consideration. It's currently under December's schedule. Bring it forward in November. If we had that discussion at that November meeting and made a change to that 2-year requirement for certain circumstances, we could do that. give that to the city council for consideration in December or whenever they could do it, December or January. And if they approve that policy that we are recommending, not just this policy, but all the other changes to the parking policy, that revote could possibly occur sooner than 2 years, depending on what policy change we recommend. That would be my suggestion.
Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions. If staff knows, based on the report, it says Brookhaven specifically had 48% of the votes in favor. Was that because there was a significant amount respond to it?
That's correct. Six were not received. That's what he said.
Okay, so when we were going through the parking permit policy, I recommended switching it to 12 months, especially for a revote for situations like this. I agree it needs to be moved forward as quick as possible. This is our impacts to the community. This is going to happen time and time again. It probably already has. I think if it could come back to us, I don't know the ability, obviously, with the Brown Act, what we can do, if there's any appeals to council that they could make to possibly have a revote for that.
Well, the problem is the policy right now says 2 years. That's it. So unless the policy's changed, there's not going to be a revote for 2 years. So we have that within our ability, currently scheduled in December's meeting, to have that discussion.
So
we could move
when-
that to November.
So when this vote was done in May of 2018, so if this was changed to 12 months, it could be redone in May of 2019, is that correct? Even though we're already in November almost?
If that's what the commission chooses. So I think all these items will come back. We can make the November, if the commission so suggests. I think that's a terrific idea. And really, you guys set the policy for how we do things. I think one of the items that council was especially tasked the commission with was to look at areas that are next to and adjacent to newly incorporated permit parking areas. So I think this falls right into what you're doing. We're looking at probably 45 days before we even get the signs and everything and all the permits distributed. So I think timing-wise, everything should work out to work with the chair's suggestion, and that makes sense to us from a staff perspective.
Mr. Teddemer?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, can you clarify what you're suggesting? Recommendation is to receive and file.
Right.
I don't know that we're bound by that. We can. It's an agendized item. So does that mean we can't take an action? That's the staff's recommendation, is to receive and file.
So depending on the recommendation, certainly staff's recommendation is receive and file. We don't have a policy that has been set to address this particular issue. That's why we would suggest we come back and determine a policy for this and everybody else in the future. I think our concern would be there are a number of people, they received on this particular street 10 yes votes out of 21 homes. The 10 affirmative people that were actually for this. We have also gotten calls saying how happy they were that their street did not get the permit parking. So we've got that side of the story too. So there's always two sides to every story, right? I think I'd be hesitant to take some action when people weren't notified from reading this that there's really an action to be taken. And if you were to take an action, people that were happy that it was opposed and failed didn't know about it, and then you're back to flipping around at your next meeting when you can just address it at your next meeting in a policy standpoint. That would be our suggestion. I think that would be a safe and cautious way to go and still get the same result.
So is staff prepared to bring back the entire parking policy at the next meeting?
I believe we can do that. We've looked at it. We'll be shifting some things around, but I think this is a priority of the commission. So
I would just
go ahead
suggest
and bring that back.
Yeah, I would just suggest then if the entire policy can't come back, then maybe just the revote portion can come back? So we can just consider that as one possible solution?
I think we can bring back the whole policy.
Okay, I just want to make sure that...
Absolutely. It'll be up to you guys how you want to address the policy.
My only suggestion would be if it cannot all come back for whatever reason, that maybe we could just bring that one portion
Absolutely.
back.
We will bring something back, for sure.
Yeah, I do know that the city council has expressed a desire for us to, as one of our high priority issues, is this parking policy. And it's been 3 months now, and if they're not going to get it even in the best case till December, if we consider it in November's meeting. So I think we need to do that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I wasn't suggesting we wait any longer. I'm just merely saying that because of the particular
Right.
situation and the urgency around this revote issue, I want to make sure that at least can get brought.
Chair Reichert, we received request to speak, sir. Monica Levac.
Okay.
So nice to see new faces. I'm with Bennett Ranch. I am probably the instigator for the permit parking. We did have 3 streets that failed. Brookmont missed it by 1 vote. And the 1 vote that Brookmont did not get was a woman that I spoke to personally who was in a wheelchair. For some reason or other, her vote didn't get in till the last minute. I think it was delivered to the city by our HOA, and it was after the date. We've done a lot of work. I know Brookhaven, there were a lot of people in support of it over there. I don't know who has called the city and said they don't like it. I do know there are quite a few renters with quite a few vehicles over there who are not in favor of it. Was that me?
I don't think so.
Did I break it? They weren't in favor of it. You know, it's really kind of pitted, street against street, as far as, now these people have got the vehicles from other streets or the apartment complexes. If you could change the policy, maybe do it a little sooner. Brookmont, like I said, missed it by 1 vote, and the city has that vote, but because it was after the date, Brookmont is in that part of that 3 streets. So very concerned for those 3 remaining streets, if you guys could bring it back sooner. Staff did a great job. We did have a few hitches and glitches in our get-along because things were mailed not to the proper place or ballots were lost. 1 ballot on Brookmont went to Brookhaven. There were issues. I think the staff took care of it really well, but, again. So I just ask that you bring it back sooner rather than later. And can we do the 45 days a little sooner? Come on, get me my signs. Yeah, please.
We're waiting for the sign orders to come in.
Okay, all right, that's all I had. If you guys
Thank
could
you.
just push it, thanks.
Just a question for staff. How late is late? 2 days, a week? Ish.
It was 5, it was 5 p.m. I think we got, it was on a Thursday, and I think we got it Monday.
We got it after the results were published, and then we're getting ballots in. So it really, it's difficult to go back after the results have been published.
We didn't get any within 30 minutes of the time.
Yeah, it wasn't anything like that.
No, it was like a week or 2, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a
long time.
And there was reasons, extenuating reasons why, but it
Anyway.
was brought to us by a neighbor. And
So do we have consensus from the commission to bring the revised parking policy to the November agenda? That's really the question.
One more recommendation from staff. If we do move that forward and approve that, we would like to move the annual traffic collision review back to December. The November agenda is huge.
It's getting big.
We're adding more to it, and
Yeah.
that's a significant issue of the policy.
Yeah.
So we would like to remove.
Everybody okay with that?
December.
Okay. Thank you all for coming, speaking.
Back with recommendations for further revisions to the policy that we tentatively, I guess, adopted.
Yeah, I think we had heard you last meeting, some of the
Yeah.
changes you had wanted. We're in the process now of redlining up the original policy with some of those changes, so you can actually see what changes were made, what was deleted, what was added, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so any reconsideration of the original vote could be, if it went down the first time, it could go up in a subsequent vote.
Well, I wasn't at there was no vote. It was just a bunch of comments to staff with the recommendation to bring a policy back as soon as
But the
possible.
reverse is true. If it was successful the first time, there needs to be a timeline for it to be reconsidered. So it's the potential reconsideration both ways, and I assume that's what we're going to be talking about.
That's what we'll talk about next month.
Correct. No, you're correct, Sonny.
Okay. Next item is the establishment of permit parking restrictions on a portion of Camino Rojo, Jubilo Place, Maza Court, and a portion of Pino Lane. Do we have any public comment on this agenda item?
No, sir.
Brief staff report?
Okay, sure. This neighborhood had sent a request in. They met the minimum requirements of getting signatures on the petition. Staff did the field work in the middle of the night again and determined that there was a huge impact in that area. If you look at page 38, I believe, of your agenda, you can see the ballots that were mailed, the number that we received, the yes votes and no votes, ballots that were not returned, and then the approval rate. We did have to take this whole area as a neighborhood based on the policy, 30 homes and or 1,000 feet of frontage. So if you've got a 500-foot street, you meet the 1,000 feet with houses fronting on both sides. So that's how we determined the cutoff on this was from the petition names we had received as well as from the physical location of the homes out there.
So
Go ahead.
this map, because there's nothing that delineates on this map where that would be.
Apologize for that map.
Really hard to read. Is it all of those streets? It says
No,
a
no, no.
portion of those streets?
If you look at that map, I think, can you distinguish the green from the brown? That's the difficult part. You can see where it's kind of green. The green, the yellow-green are the ones that were part of the approval and
Okay.
part of the
So
study
it's
area.
Colored houses, basically.
That's correct. The green area there.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners? Are you done with your staff report, Doug? or
Yes, that would conclude our report, yeah.
Questions? Seeing none, a motion would be in order to make a recommendation to the city council to approve the permit parking for this area.
I'll move the item.
Commissioner Jordan, I like using first names. Commissioner Jordan made a motion, seconded by
I'll second.
Commissioner Morper. Any other discussion? Please vote.
That motion carries unanimously.
Good job, staff. Got it done quickly, too.
Thank you. We will be moving that on to the city council then for your recommendation.
Will they get that at their next meeting in December, or is it going to take a long time? Do you know?
It won't come to its next meeting in November, probably the second meeting in November.
Okay.
We're already finishing up those staff reports for this next one.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is kind of an education program for us about various traffic engineering issues. Is there any public comment on this one?
No, sir.
Didn't think so. You're all going to leave. Boring. Go ahead, Doug.
Great, thank you very much. To the commission, this list of items is some of the day-to-day activities that we do in traffic engineering. It includes requests, studies, reviews, basically everything we do on a routine basis. We do extraordinary things also with keeping up the Lake Forest traffic analysis model. We do maintain that, as well as the transportation fee program, the Lifton program. So there are things that we do get involved with besides the day-to-day activities. This is more or less the day-to-day activities. I'm some of these. We would be happy to speak to those. If not, in the back, we have put together some of the flyers that are handouts available at the public counter, as well as these are on the city's website. And I believe these are important because what they do is they give some of the explanations for some of the things we do and some of the questions we get on a regular basis. Traffic signals, you can see that. I'm sorry.
If I may, this is terrific. We want to give you an idea of overall of different elements of traffic engineering, different things that we're up to, and certainly if you have any questions about how any of these particular elements work, please feel free to ask, whether that's development review or typical requests or field reviews. Barring that, I would like to go to page 84, which is attachment 3. And if you didn't read this in detail, I would encourage each one of you to read this attachment 3 again, because this is, I think, where much of what you think is true with traffic isn't, and it's much of what we do is counterintuitive. And this explains really, really well some of the reasons why we don't do what you would think would be common sense. And I want to highlight those, and it's a way of thinking that you might not think before. And I'd like to just highlight a couple things. These are terrific, and if you can go back and look at these are the types of things and answers as traffic commissioners you'll need in your back pocket when you're talking to people to explain why we don't do what you think is important. And I'll ask, Doug, just why don't you start with the crosswalk one?
Well, the crosswalk one is probably one of the ones that there's a big misnomer out there. I was brought up as a child in the 50s and was told crosswalks were safe. You need to be in a crosswalk across the street. I was a school monitor in the 6th grade and helping kids cross a freeway on-ramp with no controls, with a little sash and a badge and a paddle, and trying to get them across in a yellow crosswalk. I can tell you right now there's no safety in 2 painted lines on the ground. There's been significant studies done. One was a San Diego study that looked at over 400 sections with crosswalks. The other one was a Long Beach study where they did similar type exercise looking at these. And what they found is that without appropriate controls, a crosswalk is basically where people think they should cross. There's no protection there. The user has a false sense of confidence that they're safe in a crosswalk. Even today, with all the distractions we have with pedestrians walking and people driving and everything, you still see people with earbuds and telephones and just walking right across streets. It's not uncommon, and unfortunately, some of those become statistics. But I think that what we try to do here at the city, because we do have some crosswalk locations that do not have stop controls, signal controls. Look out at Serrano near the park there where the school is. We've got a crosswalk. We enhanced the crosswalk with the ladders, the vertical ladders in there. We've also put the flashing beacons to the side. I don't know if you've seen those things strobe, but they really get your attention when you're approaching a crosswalk and that button is pushed. So we try to make it a crosswalk to indicate the most appropriate place to cross an intersection. And not so much the safest, but the most appropriate. Here's where you need to cross. One thing we're wrestling with right now up on Rancho Parkway South, the access to Baker Ranch with all of the residential community on the east side there. We monitor that almost on a monthly basis, counting crossings out there and trying to get a feel for what's going on. The most appropriate place to cross is to walk 300 feet down to the signal, cross, and walk back up. People are still running across the street. It is legal because Sunflower is a private street. It does intersect a public street. Therefore, it breaks from the signal to the next traffic control, which is to the south. So, again, we will not put a crosswalk there, and if we do, it'll be because there's so much volume going across there. We need to do that, but we will not do it without protection.
If I may, I'd like to just highlight part of what this says. So the city of San Diego looked at 400 intersections for 5 years. It had a marked crosswalk on one side and an unmarked crosswalk on the other. About 2.5 times as many pedestrians used the marked crosswalk, but about 6 times as many collisions were reported in the marked crosswalk. And so that's kind of the idea of often you'll get the request, put a marking down there, it's safer. People get that false sense of security. And we've talked about, and they're appropriate to use too. I'm not saying they're not appropriate, but it's counterintuitive, right? Oh, put a crosswalk here, it's safer. Well, sometimes it's not. And these studies show it really isn't. And I think what's going on is, we've all seen it, we've probably done it half the time, right, is you have that crosswalk, you have the right-of-way, you step out in front of that car, and you're kind of daring him to stop, and you kind of eye him down, right, and he stops. And then you go and cross, right? That happens with a lot of people. And if you take away that crosswalk, well, you're not nearly as confident as a pedestrian, and you're scared to death, and you're waiting for that moment, and then you cross. I'd rather people be scared to death when they cross than overconfident. And so that's one of the counterintuitive examples that I wanted to just really highlight and saying that's one thing. It's the same thing with stop signs. When you have a stop sign that's not warranted, and we'll talk a little bit about warrants, which basically warrants are a set of measurements or formulas that over time the state and the general industry has determined that this is when a stop sign really works, and these are conditions when a stop sign doesn't work. We have strict criteria for that, and we look at those, and what happens is when you put in a stop sign where it doesn't make sense, when you have high through traffic and you say, oh, let's put down a series of stop signs to slow people down. What studies have shown is what happens is, first thing they do is, if they do stop, they speed up in between the stop signs. So you really get more speeding in between. You get people starting to disregard stop signs because they really don't belong there. And so they start rolling through stop signs. So now you have people pulling out, counting on them stopping because they should have stopped, rolling out in front of them, somebody rolls through, blows through a stop sign, you have more accidents. So accidents increase even though you think you're doing something safer. So there's those types of issues that really go into detail through this Appendix 3. And that's why I want to highlight that and just encourage you all to really read through this. This is, I think, the meat of what we do and why we don't do certain things and why we don't react to certain things, where we really want to go back and look at the warrants and look at what the formula and what experience we know. We want to study something correctly, and we know when, in general, this is going to do well. So the state and the federal government actually sets these things up. So we're consistent, so as you drive through communities through the United States, you can expect the same thing. You can expect a stop sign, you can expect a crosswalk, you can expect things to be the same for drivers. So you have the same reaction to signs, and it starts to make sense. If somebody were to use signs in a different way in a different state or a different city and go city to city, it confuses drivers, and then you don't have that consistency, and then you get mistakes. So that's kind of the general tone of why we don't put more stop signs in. Stop signs, if you recall, are to set your right-of-way, right? To say who's got the right-of-way, who can move first, and not to slow people down and things of that nature. So traffic signals, similar logic behind them. Speed limits, we can talk about how we set speed limits. Crosswalks, children at play. So those are the items that I wanted to highlight, and if you have any questions on them, we'd love to hear from you.
Any questions? Mr. Teddemer?
Not a question, but an observation from my former life. I know that the council considers speed limits periodically around streets, and I think maybe one, no urgency around this, but one that sort of explains how speed limits are established. We might think that we can all just kind of go, I know it should be there, but it's the 85th percentile, et cetera, you guys know well. I think it might be another good sort of summary on how traffic speeds are set.
No, very true. The way speed limits are set, we do have a handout for that. We didn't include everything. We're trying not to bore you. But that is one that's very important. It's the one true process where the public actually influences the law.
Right.
It's based on non-peak hours, and it's based on prevailing speed of the vehicles during this time frame that's non-peak. When we take surveys out there, we get a graph of all of the speeds that were recorded. There has to be anywhere from 100 to 200 speeds. We look at those. There's a bell curve. We take 85% of those drivers and determine that speed that the 85th percent are driving at. And then we look at other conditions. We look at the land use, roadway geometry, sight distance, collision history, and then if it's significant, we can reduce. The law allows us to reduce that 85th percentile down to a more comfortable level due to those items I just mentioned. and then we determine what the speed limit is out there.
And
Well, 5 miles an hour is, yeah, those are major, that's the only reduction we're allowed, right?
And if the city were to have an arbitrary speed limit, as I recall, then it becomes unenforceable, or at least if the public becomes aware that it was an arbitrary speed, then you go to court and the judge will likely throw it out because
That's
it's not
correct.
based on...
We've seen a lot of those thrown out when the speed limits expire. There is an expiration date on those. Right now, we are in the process of redoing all of our speed limits within the city here and relooking at all of the arterials where we have speeds posted.
Thank you.
Jordan?
Mr. Chair, just a question. Maybe staff can explain attachment 4 specific to the Foothill Ranch Elementary suggested route to school. Is this a collaboration between the school district and the city, kind of how it's advertised, how it's put out, and a little bit reason behind it?
Sure, that's correct. We do this for each school that's in the city here. We put these together. This was one that we work with the school district itself, the school itself. We work with the integrated collision reports. We work with those, and also the Orange County Sheriff's Department inputs into this. Then we determine what we call the suggested route to school, and then you can see the tips we have in here and some of the other items that we have put together. These are distributed by the school, usually around the first week of school. We look at these on an annual basis. That's what we do in the summertime. We repaint all of the school markings in the city. We refresh all the signs that are related to schools, and we update all of these school documents that we pass out. We prepare for that.
And for the crossing guards, is that a contribution from the school district as well for the cost, or is the city?
That I don't know. The police
I think it's a city, isn't it?
The city pays for that completely. Yeah. Yes. No help from the school district.
Any other questions?
Well, I'm going to be looking at this firsthand next year for my first time. My little one's going to school, so not sure I'm going to take any of those routes. I think I'm going to take that little path up the side by Whiting Ranch. A little safer, maybe. I don't know. It depends if it's on bike or foot. But
Commissioner Aquino has a question.
It's more of a comment that when, as I'm looking through this is one of my notes I wrote down during this week when I was reading what you prepared, and you guys did a great job again, is the education of the residents. It's how we get to where we get to. And we're talking about when you were bringing up the crosswalks. One of the things I started writing down, it's not only distracted walking, it's distracted driving that causes those accidents. And then some of them is just complete disregard for safety. So those are when you start, it's not just one person's fault, half and half. There's different variables. One of the big things when it comes to the safety and speeds is we have an asset right here. It's the Sheriff's Department. They have motors. They go out there. Send Greg Allen out there, and he'll write 200 tickets in a day, and he loves it. So, but once again, you guys did a great job. When I was reading this, I was like, this is simple. I don't know where you get the time.
So I have a question on speed bumps. I was at a Lake 2 meeting Tuesday night, and one of our neighborhoods has been asking, I believe, you and us for speed bumps in a city for quite a long time. And you guys don't do speed bumps and humps, but Lake 2 has them in all of our private streets for 40 years with none of the problems you guys have indicated. No claims, no accidents, no issues with the Sheriff's Department, Police Department, anybody. So I'm just I don't know where this policy comes from. You wrote this policy, or if this is a document from some traffic engineering group, or if we could even consider a speed hump, not a bump, but a hump on a street without creating a whole can of worms in the whole city. I know that that's a big issue, but this particular street that this homeowner's been complaining about has got a real speeding problem.
I think the biggest concern we have with speed bumps is the fact that they are not official traffic control devices per the California Vehicle Code. Arizona, they are. It's included in their vehicle code. It's not in California. and I think that raises a liability issue for the city. If we do put them out there and they're not official traffic control devices, we're a general law city, we follow state laws. Charter cities, they can make their own laws up, as you're aware. But I think that's the biggest concern. I know the cities, other cities I do represent, none of them have speed bumps. However, on private property, one of the things we're seeing right now is the fire authority has gone back, and they've actually come up with designs for bumps, humps, and speed cushions for their vehicles that they allow on private property. I know how the cushions work. We've installed them in Tustin and private property, and they work very well for the fire department response. They do lose about 10 seconds per call, they said, was their average. Now, what's 10 seconds to a heart attack victim or 10 seconds to someone that tripped and fell? That's, has to do with medical conditions and things like that. But I know that's one of the main causes is a liability that opens the city.
And there's no state standard for speed humps, basically.
No.
Any other questions?
Question, just a comment. Now, I wasn't at the meeting you referred to, but if it's a street, I'm thinking now this won't be the first time it's been brought to the attention of the city by the same gentleman who remains unnamed. Okay. The fact remains is that the same report is given relative to the city's current position pertaining to these and the rationale why. I can respect that. I disagree only because my street, I was instrumental in getting these same speed hump bumps, whatever we want to call them, on our street from a safety standpoint. And we did it when our little kids were learning to ride bicycles, and we had guys that were employees of contractors still building homes in the last phase, and these guys want to get home, and at the end of the workday, they'd go zooming down our street. And we said, whoa, wait a minute, you can only yell so many times at these guys in there. It wasn't working. So for safety reasons, we had them installed. And they've been installed ever since. We've received absolutely zero in terms of complaints from our association members. And we've got almost 600 homes in that one tract. And I would say 90, maybe 85% use that same street at some point in time. For safety reasons, they went in. Now, there are other cities in this county that have these speed bumps, and they're on public streets. So the rationale behind us not doing it has to do with liabilities and so forth. They must have liabilities too. I suspect there's no evidence in our city in which speed humps have become a liability for those who put them in, i.e. our association. And they're all over. And now that they're in, for safety reasons, which primarily is slowing traffic down, that's the whole idea, is that it works. So I think when a person comes into the city and wants to ask us to reconsider it, that we look at it with new eyes. And yes, the city did a marvelous job on the study, because I came into the meeting and was association president at the time, and I tried to stand up for that man. But I listened carefully to what the city was saying, and yeah, there was a speed control thing out there, or not control, but the monitoring of the LED readout. The traffic officer was out there, and the city's justification was pretty much as you stated. I think it's worth reconsidering in terms of I don't know if it's a policy or whatever, but it's kind of like residents come before us this evening wanting us to reconsider the policy or the legitimate current concerns for where they live. And I think that's an example of an item that's worth reconsidering. So I've talked long enough. My opinion.
Okay, anything else? Okay, then we'll close that subject and go on to commission comments. And we'll start with maybe Commissioner Morper first this time.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you made a long report, as brief as possible. I think we did our job in terms of reading the materials that you provided, and I thank you for that. I think if there's anything that we get, it appears to be thorough in terms of the written report. I like that. I'll take the time to read it. If I have a question, I'll pick up the phone. That's how I feel, and I know you guys subscribe to that, so thank you for the reports tonight. I'd like to be sure that though we're having commission reports, that we're in sync with what's been requested from the citizens from Peachwood who have a concern, and we haven't talked about legitimate alternatives that would mitigate the concerns they have. I don't think anybody's asking for a stoplight there. I didn't hear that stated at all, so that's not even a concern. But things that come to mind are dedicated right turn lanes, The issue is cars speeding up the hill and these guys pulling out of Palmwood, as was described, and being afraid to get out there for fear the car that is winding up turning right on the Palmwood is not going to go right. The guy's going to go through the intersection. It's a trap. So I'd hope that in your reconsideration that you take a look at that as an option. I hear what you're saying regarding the crosswalk, which was also mentioned by the same people, and I was invited out there 2 months ago by a concerned group that had kids going to school and so forth, and it is a part of the safe route to school, and I buy into that. And I was also a junior traffic patrol boy. I don't know what you were called in your city. In fact, I was captain of the group. And I hear what you're saying, and I happen to have been there in San Diego when it was flourishing. So I respect the report. I understand what you're saying, and I'm sure there's validity to it. But in this particular case, whatever we could do in the least way to start the mitigation for the concerns of the people who live there. Let's start at the lowest level and see if that works, so long as it appears safe. Those guys nosing out are doing it for their own safety. And I know the city's got a hold of the post office to move that mailbox so that the guys can see uphill. Well, I hope the post office gets with it, and if they haven't in the next couple of weeks, I'll plan on going down there and talking again to the postmaster, because they ought to be with us on this, So that's my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Pequeno?
Other than just great job staff, when I look at what they present, they're the experts, and I really appreciate the hard work you guys do. Carol, and you over there too.
Commissioner Vilbuck?
I got a last name there. Thank you, sir. A couple comments. Just wanted to give praise to the City of Lake Forest as participating as one of the 6 cities in the point of dispensing exercise that occurred at the Great Park, which is just down the street. We dispensed, almost 1,000 pumpkins amongst people that came through to test our emergency plans if we could pass out a commodity or an item during a disaster. It's very important. It allowed us to build this plan. It's a regional approach, that it's local. It's really important, and I thought we had a little fun in doing it. I did want to give thanks to Mayor Pro Tem Basil for her comments when the pod became before council maybe a month or so ago, that she wants to make sure that there's a site up in Foothill Ranch, Portola Hills area, that both the pod locations, while this isn't this committee's, they're down further in Lake Forest, and that needs to be looked at, and I appreciate her mentioning that, staff, and also follow up with staff on that to see if we could find a location somewhere in the northern port that can provide that service if needed to the residents that live up there. Secondly, I wanted to ask, I know there was a couple emails that I had with Mr. Rogers regarding 2nd Street down there in that neighborhood. There was some vandalized signs, some concerns that possibly maybe code enforcement could look at, whether sleeping in vehicles or, a whole bunch of nuisance activities. I know that staff responded to that, but I wasn't sure if code enforcement's been down there or what maybe the status is on that.
We can follow up with code enforcement on that. The signs that you had sent the photos over, we sent those over to the maintenance group. I'll check with them tomorrow and make sure they've replaced those signs already, so.
And do you perhaps know, I know 2nd Street's that one that doesn't have any homes that face it. Was that something that we provided input to the permit policy from last commission meeting? Did we discuss anything about that, how that could maybe look? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think that the city, the way we're looking at it right now is we're trying to resolve the issue at the source. The issue is overflow parking from the Saddleback Ranch apartments. Code enforcement, the city attorney's office, and the community development department, I know, have all been actively working with the owners of that facility and that complex, trying to get them to comply with the code requirements of entitlements and the parking needed for entitlements. I know that their attorneys have been talking with the city attorneys. The last update we had got is that there's still ongoing discussions. They are being fined at the rate of $500 a day, I believe it is.
Just leave it with the city attorneys.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, it's in process.
Yeah, it's in the process, correct.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Is there any possibility, and I'm just throwing this out there, it's probably a crazy idea and you guys will probably look at me weird, but is there any way what the process might be to put a temporary parking restriction or temporary no parking signs on one side of the street to resolve this problem that is documented and is a nuisance for their community members for a time until we can resolve that with Saddleback Ranch? I'm not sure what body would need to approve that or thoughts, but I just feel so bad for that community that there's so much documentation and we keep saying that we're going to resolve it, but if we're still trying to resolve it at the source, which I agree is the right way to do it, is there anything that we can do that maybe staff can come up with rather than just pushing it between departments and the city?
Yeah, and to your point, certainly we're actively pursuing the correct solution, right, is at the source. I think we also have to keep in mind that the people that do live in the apartments are our community also, right? And so those people are somewhat being squeezed, right? They're in the battle with an apartment complex that has changed things overnight on them. We've got single-family residence homes that are saying, hey, don't come into our neighborhood, fine. There's some areas that are in between that nobody's fronting on. If we went out overnight and did that, where do those people go? And so, and is that helping the apartment complex? It gets complex quickly, and those are people, too, we have to look out for. So I think in our mind, it would be, first thing is let's try to solve the problem at the source. They're doing something illegally. We don't want them to profit from doing something illegally by banning everybody, from parking off-site. But we don't want that parking impacting other people. So this is why you guys are here, right? Why we have a commission is those kind of gray areas. So we would think let's keep pursuing it and hopefully there's a break there, and then kind of go from there, and then you assess it. But is it right? And this would be up to the commission or council. Is it right to restrict parking from people who have been pushed out because the people don't like them parking near them? You start to pick sides.
I appreciate
tough.
that. How do we get the $500 a day raised to $1,000?
That we're talking to the city attorney about. So we'll let them do their job, and they do it quite well here.
I will tell you one case law, since we're kind of early tonight, that I thought was relevant in a sense with the fee schedule. In Laguna Beach, we have a very high fire severity zone. So we had a $100 ticket for people that would smoke in our open wildland space. And that was a problem. We had cameras up there. We had speakers up there from our public safety dispatchers telling people to leave. And it was a constant problem, a nuisance for the community, and could lead to a disaster. Not that this might have that same context. However, they raised it up to $500. You know how many tickets had to be given? About 100. And then it wasn't a problem anymore. So, you know, at some point, I wonder what their cost rate benefit is that you know, Saddleback Apartments is. And if you're listening, just fix it. Don't charge your people. You know, be good community members. I think that's what we're all trying to solve here. And, you know, let's raise that rate.
Thank you. Commissioner Tittemer?
Thank you for the goodies. That's it. Cool. Thank you.
I have 3 things. So last month meeting, we approved PPLTs. When is that going to go to City Council? Because I believe it's going to be a capital request, right? The capital project budget goes to the City Council usually in March, April,
Right, so
sometime.
it'll be in 2 phases. Well, it'll go in 2 phases. One is the report and the concept. So council approves the concept. Yeah, we agree with it or not. Then it will come back during the budget process to budget those things in, unless council wants us to do something earlier.
So when would it go to the council for concept?
I believe, do you remember? It's on our agenda. I can get back to you with that. I'm sure it's
Hopefully
coming up.
soon, right? Like December, November, something?
Yeah, the report's done. It's basically, we already wrote it once, so we'll just pass that along.
Okay, and then also, it looks like November's meeting is going to be big, long meeting. I'm wondering, you said you wanted the annual traffic collision review, move that into December, and then we're going to add the permit parking thing back in November. I feel like it's going to be a long, big meeting in November, so if there's something in there that we can move forward and need to give us more time on the important stuff like the parking thing, we can, I think, should consider that. I would like, the third thing is this Peachwood issue. I do drive that street every day, and it is dangerous. There's been a motorcyclist was killed a couple of years ago coming out of Wood onto Peachwood. I'm not sure there's anything that can be done, but I'm not sure what the right process is, whether this needs to be an agenda item for discussion with the public or a report that comes to us saying, look, we looked at this thing backwards and forwards, there is something we can do, because another issue on that street is the condos at the end of Peachwood towards Trabuco. Ridgewood? Is it Ridgewood? That exit there is tremendously dangerous. I almost got hit yesterday there. The whole thing, is there something we can do? If
Yes.
nothing, there's nothing, but I think they deserve an answer, and there's a lot of people asking about this.
So I would suggest, and we've been thinking about it, and we've got some ideas that have been floating around. Peachwood used to be back in the day was what was projected to go through. That's why it's as wide as it is. It really got usurped by Big Parkway being built instead of Peachwood. So it's a big, wide street. We've got some ideas that we've been floating around in there of some things to do. I would suggest we start with the collision report, our annual collision report. That's a great place to start to really see data. So, you'll have people in here, and we never want to minimize feeling dangerous condition. We'll hear those words a lot. Let's look at what the data tells us and what we know about collision rates and where we want to gear our resources. So we start with that, and we've got some other ideas when we look into capital projects later in the next year. I think we'll come up with some ideas of some things we can do, and there's always budget associated with that. But we've been out there, we've looked at it a few times, we've increased the vision zones out there, let us noodle on that a little bit and come back to you.
I think it needs attention, and as does that traffic light. It's the gentleman that made the comments about the long times ever since the synchronization program came in.
Yep.
That's correct.
Yep.
It's
One runs great on Trabuco.
It's not.
And that's what synchronization does. Right, it's stealing from your turns to keep people moving. Yeah.
See, this is an example, and I I want to respect the process that you're used to using. Studies, making sure, I understand covering the bases, and you don't want to do anything illegal and all that. I respect that. But once again, it's not sounding like it's going to move expediently. And even the least restrictive mitigating action is not coming back as, we don't need a study for that. We could do that. All we need is you guys to say, yeah, let us give it a shot. And go for it. I hear, we've been kicking it around. We'll study it some more. And we got 2 phases of things that'll be done, and one of them has to do with money sometime next year. Jeez. See, if I heard you right, it sounds like folks are getting put off again and farther. I'd say I'd come back next time with, hey, this is the least restrictive thing that we could do that we think from our experience could be expedited, meet the test of safety, and really be proactive for the people that have come again and talked about it going on over time. And it's not just a mix-up on turning in ballots and things like that. That could be solved in 29 seconds. I think this is the same thing. Let's push it forward and get something done by next time. If you've got that kind of authority, if you need us, put it on next month's agenda. And let's move it up.
I think at the minimum...
You're talking about Peachwood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At a minimum, we could get a consent calendar report that says, here's what we've looked at and what we're considering about doing. At least it's something, some action's going. Because I think this one's a big one, as is Saddleback Ranch Road on our next month. You know, there's lots of important stuff, guys, but I think you've kind of answered already by ALF some of the issues and concerns and what things we might want to do. But I think we owe the people an answer quickly. Either we're looking at this, take some time, or there's nothing we can do. Something.
It would be helpful for me if, well, you're up there a lot, if you can define the problem for us. Not just it's dangerous or I feel unsafe. What direction, what time of day, anything you can give us specifics are really, really helpful.
I will do so.
Right, because when it's the more specific I can get of what you're feeling, what you're seeing.
And I think you got some of those from
we got a great list
some
from
other people too, right?
Absolutely.
Very specific.
Yeah, and I think we responded pretty well, but we can wrap that together in a report and bring that back and take a look at what we've done already.
Maybe we need traffic calming. Ooh, I hate that word. But
that's actually something we've been thinking about, actually, out there. Because that's what we're up to. I know.
I know.
That's exactly what you were asking for.
Tom, you're asking something back from us. The man standing there, and I don't remember his name. It could have been the
Jeff Mueller.
First man. What's his name?
Jeff Mueller.
Jeff.
Yes.
Described it.
Oh, we've got it written from him.
Okay, well,
But as also Jim's up there all the time, so he's also mentioned some things. So the more specifics we can get, since you're here, the better. That's all. If you're up there all the time and you notice anything, anytime you guys are around, anytime, give us specifics is terrific, and that's something that we can react to too. Okay. So I know you just mentioned you had a close encounter at the intersection up at Ridgeline. So those specifics is what I'm looking for. If you have an encounter someplace and it doesn't seem right, give me some specifics, time of day, which direction where you're traveling. Those sorts of things are helpful.
All right.
Okay. Okay, I think that's it.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
Just a couple things, and always, obviously, feel free to call us anytime you got any questions about the staff report or others. I'm assuming now you all have your city emails, and you've been using those.
Has everybody got that, by the way?
Not yet? Is that on you or is that on us?
Don't know.
Don't know, okay?
I've tried to get into the system, and so far I've been unsuccessful, but
Is it your password issue, Mark? Is that the issue you've been having, log in?
I don't know. Still working on it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well,
I,
fair enough.
Yeah.
There's a form we've asked you to fill out also. We need that signed and back. Very good. And then the third item is we have iPads available. We would encourage all of you to get a city iPad and use one. You should have seen an email out from Jennifer today on that. That way we don't have to spend the time printing out all this information. You can reference things. Certainly encourage that for everyone so we can go electronic and save some trees. So you can respond back to Jennifer on that, and we have the training and the iPads and everything that we'll need to get.
and I did have a password problem with the email, and I reached out to Carol. Same day, IT called me back. We worked on the time. They were able to reset the password, give me a new one, and it was outstanding. So thanks to staff.
Can I just assume we should reset both of yours? Email, we'll send a new one with a new, however it works, but we'll contact IT and have them give it a new try.
Let's give it a try.
Try to do that. Okay, well, we will do that then. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.